Hello, everyone. Welcome to Big League Dreaming, a show about baseball, dreams, and family. I'm John Gonzalez. If this is your first time, and this is a podcast with a dad and his three sons talking about the game they love so much. First of all, before we introduce our guests, let's see who we have on the show today in terms of my kids, right? My sons. Let's start with son number one, Zach Gonzalez. He is based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Zach, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm getting really excited for MLB to start getting kicked off here. I have like my auction draft for my deep dynasty fantasy league next Monday. The spring breakout rosters are revealed tomorrow. That'll be next weekend. I'm pumped up, man.
When did you win your rookie league or whatever it is, minor league thing, fantasy league last year?
Yeah, my deep dynasty league. I won my first championship was last year. And I got a lot of guys coming back, so should have a good squad.
That's cool. Well, Zach is the Mariners fan. We'll talk to him about his Mariners here in a second. Son number two is Ty Gonzalez. He's based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Ty is the Mets fan. How you doing today, Ty?
Doing great. Super excited for our guest today. We've had a ton of different guests on over the last 4 seasons of this podcast, but we haven't had a fellow podcaster, so I'm super excited about it.
You're right. We have not had a fellow podcaster, which is really weird. That's what they teach you in podcast school. The way to grow your podcast is to get fellow podcasters on. I guess we're not doing things in the traditional way. And then son number three is Zane Gonzalez. He's down in Florida. He coaches at Indiana University at South Bend. He is the associate head coach, and they are on their spring trip right now in the Lakeland, Orlando area. They had games yesterday, and today they'll play the rest of the week. And then he may be joining me in Nashville. Right now I'm in South Bend, Indiana, which they're based in South Bend. I'm on my way to Nashville to hang out with some friends down there. And then Zane is supposed to be, guys, if it works out, joining me in Nashville on Saturday. So we'll see how it all comes together with Zane. He might even join us later tonight on the podcast. So let's get to our guest. I've known this guy for several years now, and I thought he'd be great to have on the show just because he has a passion for baseball like we do. Let's welcome to the show, Rogelio Castillo. Rogelio, how are you doing?
Doing well, guys. I'm glad to be on. This is for once, you can totally relate to this. When you don't have to host a podcast and you're a guest, your preparation is still the same, but it's not as intensive, if you will. So
you're not driving the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Just along for the ride. You're the kid in the back yelling, "Hey, turn some music." I love it. Well, I've always wanted to have you on the show because you're a Tigers fan like myself. And although in your bio, I learned a little bit about you, I didn't realize you were a Marlins fan back in the day.
Yeah. When we my father had family down in Miami. So when we went down to Florida all the time, it was a thing when the Marlins started becoming a team. It was just kind of funny because some of the my father being Cuban, my uncles were just kind of against the team for a minute because they felt like they're until Livan Hernandez came. And that was a 1997 run, and then they started rallying around the team a little bit. But since then, it's more what I find interesting about Florida is they really root for their local guys, and a lot of guys that come out of Hialeah, like you think of, I'm drawing a blank on the pitcher for the Yankees right now at the moment. But nevertheless, that's how I became a Marlins fan. I love the jersey. I was a big teal thing. I don't know why in the 90s everything was teal. It's just like it's just one of those things. But nevertheless, it was also because they had Cuban representation, and my dad was pretty stoked to see that outside of Barrio Garbe, which was the 84 Tigers. But beyond that, there wasn't really a lot of Cubans in baseball at the time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And in fact, the fun fact here for the podcast, the very first interleague game in Tigers history was at, or at least the home game, I'm not really sure if they played away, was for the Tigers at the old Tiger Stadium. And they played the Florida Marlins in that game. And I remember it because in that series, we didn't go to the first game. I think we went to the second or third game of the series. I took Zach and Ty, that are on the podcast today, to that game. You guys, do you remember that? Seeing the fish mascot there, the Marlins mascot?
I vaguely remember it. I think I might have been 2. I don't know if I have a weird memory of being up in the nosebleeds and getting a Little Caesars pizza. So I don't know if that's that game or not. That's about all I can picture, though.
Nick, you're a little older. Do you remember that game at all?
Somewhat, yeah. I remember getting like a pennant for my bedroom, and it was like a special like inaugural interleague play. Like and it had like the Marlins logo on it with the Tigers. So, yeah, good memories for sure.
Good memories indeed. Rogelio, tell folks a little bit about what you do now, because you are in the game in the sense of you're a podcaster. You follow the Tigers. You're a member of the what is it, the Baseball Writers Association, right? And you made a career out of this. You went from being kind of a fan, someone that followed the game, to working in the industry as a professional. Give us what you're doing these days, where we can find you, and then tell us how you got into it.
So I co-founded the Tiger Miley Report back in 2019 with a couple of friends of mine that I originally did the podcast. Let me start from the beginning. Actually, I started doing the Tigers podcast right after college with a couple of friends of mine from the University of Michigan Dearborn, and they needed a baseball guy, and I so happened to know baseball, and I went to broadcasting. I did a little time at WGRD in Grand Rapids, and so they felt, because of my part-time status, that I could be a good podcaster. And so that's how I got into it. And then from there, I started running Fansided's Motor City Bengals site, just by persistence and just kind of networking a little bit. I've been working for Fansided.com, took a time out to work for Woodward Sports, which was a startup, and went back to being on my own. And pretty much this is an independent endeavor, if you will. And thanks to the Detroit beat writers, they allowed me to be part of that association, and I'm really blessed and honored to do that, because that was just such a cool thing that they recognized the work that I did, and along with my partner Chris Brown, my podcast partner Chris Brown. And how I got started was really just like I said, just somebody asked me about talking about Tigers, and I said sure. And at the time, this was 2012, 2013. Everybody was loving the Tigers. It was really, the bandwagon was back. And I was kind of like I was still a fan, but I was also kind of a bitter fan, because these people are just, complaining online about, well, Jim Leland's line changes and da da da. And I avoided Twitter, but I had to get Twitter for a college class. And so then that's how I got stuck on that. But I started flexing my baseball IQ, because I've always been a guy that when we go to trivia, or when I was around talking baseball with my friends, I was the go-to person for that. And it's not like a humble brag or anything, but I just happen to remember things like, until Justin Verlander won 20 games. Bill Gullickson was the last one. If you look at some of his stats, it's atrocious, but I digress. And it just kind of evolved from there. And by day, I work in marketing, but by night, I do this. And I would love to do this full time, but I turned something into a hobby, a passion, into something that it's been somewhat pay the bills a little bit, but it's really, really fueled my love for the game. I've been in love with the game since my first mag mitt that I got when I was 8 or 9 years old. I played for the Southwest Dearborn Heights Wildcats.
That's what I love about you, Rogelio, is that you may be doing this kind of, I guess, part-time professional, part-time hobby, but you approach it as a professional. Like, you've already been to spring training, right? Were you down there earlier this year? I mean,
yep,
so I
drove by myself.
I remember exchanging some direct messages with you, like, yeah, I'm going to go to the go to the Whitecaps game, which is a 2.5-hour drive, right, from you. Come over here to watch some prospect and then drive back. I said, where are you spending the night? You're like, I'm just driving back.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, I don't know, like, it was funny. I stopped halfway down to Chattanooga. Was a halfway point for Lakeland, and then I kept driving. I drove through Atlanta early in the morning, and I somehow avoided all the Atlanta traffic, and it was nice, because everybody knows who drives that route on 75 knows how bad it was. I had no problem with it. I got the joys of hanging out at Buc-ee's and enjoying the food and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's just something about, like, we walk in and then you get to see these players get in a different element and everything. I don't know, that was my motivation. And just seeing the parents, like, having some of the conversations I had with prospect parents after a game or after the season, that's what kind of goes in my head a little bit, like, going, this drive is not that bad, but things could be a lot worse. And I could be pulling Excel reports like I was earlier today. So,
Mac, I'm sure you have some questions, because you follow the minor leagues quite extensively here on Big League Dreaming, the podcast. I'm sure you have some questions for Rogelio.
Yeah, of course. So now you have Tigers minor league report. And I guess, like, what kind of access do you have when you went down to spring training? Were you like interviewing players? Do you have players on your podcast? Who are some of like the guests you typically have? Maybe who was your first player interview? Things like that.
So our first player interview, we have to go back to 2018, and I got a chance to. First player interview we had was with Jacob Robson, who is no longer with the organization. But then our big interview we did on video was with Riley Green, a much different Riley Green, and that was the first time we did like something formal where we started taking ourselves like, okay, we should take this a little seriously outside of just a hobby kind of thing. And we also had a chance to talk to Parker Meadows and Lance Parrish when he was manager at West Michigan. So that was really cool because Lance, we didn't ask him about the 1984 Tigers World Series, and I think he appreciated that. He told us this great story how he was learning how to be a switch hitter, and then they totally abandoned the plan after one spring training. But for our podcast, last year we had Cole Keith on, Justin Henry Malloy. We usually just try to get players that are coming up. Last year was good to see Cole Keith. We had him on before the big extension. Same thing with Malloy now, all these prospect love. But we always try to reach out. Sawyer Gibson Long too. We talked to a couple agents. We don't try to. A lot of people try to blow up people on DMs, but we try to do the agent route, see how that goes. But our YouTube channel is a good mix of highlighting the players, showing what their skill set is, and just kind of talking about it. And we never go out of the way to bash the player or anything like that because I'm 5'7", I'm uncoordinated, I have bad ankles these days. For us, it's just providing analysis professionally and allowing. A lot of times we have parents that come up to us and say, "Hey, thanks for the coverage. Really appreciate it." Because Cole Keith's mom came up to me after the press conference because I have Baseball Writers Association access, and we spoke for 20 minutes afterwards, and she was thanking me, and she wished best wishes for my podcast partner who was sick. So it blew me away how many people listen to us, and so just providing those clips on Twitter, giving them because a lot of these parents can't come to these games all the time. And we were just thinking about it as like, okay, we're just baseball geeks. We love the game. But then when the parents started getting involved with us and asking us like, hey, we appreciate the clips or whatever. And then we just send them pictures. We're just doing that to say, hey, you know what? This is no problem for us at all. Because if we can help you watch your son play, by all means. And it's kind of evolved from there. And we do our top 30 prospect list. We have a couple writers now that we try to help out. We have 2 writers on our staff that are trying to get college credit, and again, using their writing experience to help build out the resume.
All right, you must be like thinking, wow, this is so cool, right?
Yeah, super cool, man. I mean, it's great to hear how the progression of your podcast has expanded. What are your hopes like in the future? Do you like what are kind of your dreams with it?
I it's a good question because I feel like I'm at a weird crossroad in my life where I would like to make this a full-time job. I mean, it'd be ideal. We get a lot of our people donating to the website. That's how we keep going. And then with our YouTube channel right now, starting to crank up, we'll get some money going there too. But I would love to do this full-time. I'd love to talk baseball full-time and not having the ability to, because I'm always curious how much or how better could I be as an analyst or as a writer if I could devote myself full time to this and really full time, not, because you got to think about your mental health too. Like sometimes or when you go to the gym and, my wife, so, sometimes my wife sees me here in the office all the time. She's like, hell yeah. I mean, hey, it's like, oh, it's crazy. It's 2 games going on at once. I kind of, and so, but if I can have the ability to just do this full time, that'd be fantastic. And I not for lack of applying or anything, but I'm at the age where it's like either I do this full time or I do my marketing job full time, and then this becomes kind of more a hobby. But I feel like I've come so far not to just throw it aside, and all the networking and all the resources and just, but the amount of people I've interacted with and just, it just feels like I've progressed so much from just as a group, just not to just throw it all away, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And, it's good to get this kind of behind the scenes look at how a podcaster really operates this day and age, because most of them do it out of passion. They just love it. And I think you're not different in the sense that you would love to do this full time. But part of this podcast is we talk about big league dreaming, where we interviewed players or coaches or broadcasters, and most of the stories are a little the same. They played baseball all through like little league. They played through high school. Some of them played college baseball. Some of them were, draft picks or, hope to be playing in the major leagues, and they find out they're just not good enough. I love you sent us your bio here. You were in what, Dearborn Heights Baseball League, right? Kind of a version of Little League when you played. Did you have these aspirations? Were you like the big slugger on the team hitting home runs? I mean, were you a prospect back in your playing days?
So it was funny. Growing up, I was the big guy on our team in a sense of like I was a catcher, and usually I would position people because all I would have to do is see a guy. I would pay attention before the game, position everybody, and Coach Hawkins, I'll never forget it. He would just say he had Coach Hawkins was a man of very few words when I played, and he was like, "Hey, whatever he wants him to do, you do it." But then it was my brother who was the better gifted athlete that came up, and he was the one that started hitting the home runs. But I was the one that was the guy that could sacrifice the bunt guy over. I was the technic guy, like the small ball. I did the little things like that. But then when I needed to come up with a hit, I could come up, like choke up the bat, get a single right up the middle, or however you fit. I was kind of more, as I got older and I realized I couldn't catch up with a curveball and a fastball, I became more of that. So I when I realized that when you saw seeing a ball at the top of the zone and then it disappears before, like you just go like this and you just go, oh, wow, it just happened. And that's when the things I'm like, maybe baseball's not the thing for me long term. But when they start throwing changeups at you too, that's the same thing. It's like, you have the same release point. Oh man. And they can easily shift over to the left. And now you start playing in leagues that are a lot better, and infielder where the infield is not cat litter. And so you have these manicured fields and that kind of thing with the ball, it plays differently. Then it's like the realization came over, but I still had a lot of fun.
Oh, Zach, you probably remember that realization, right? You're like, oh, everyone's great. I love this game, but you know what? I'm not sure if I'm going to make the next level.
Yeah, you definitely reach that team, whether it be, high school, college, or minor leagues. You reach that team where you're like, okay, these guys are a lot better than me. Like, I'm good, But I'm sure you can relate to Rogelio's older brother being a much better prospect than him, right?
I don't know if I want to dive deep into that, but I will say I can relate on what you guys are saying. You get to that point where it's like, yeah, these guys are a lot better than me, because I went from the end of my playing career, I went from being the star player on the JUCO squad, playing a week of summer ball and getting my butt whooped by players from LSU and Kansas when I played in the Northwoods leagues. And I was like, yep, that was fun. I'm like, yep, I'm done.
Well, I always loved your attitude, Ty. Like whenever you competed, you're like, no one's better than me. I'm the best.
Yeah, until I got there. Then I was like, wow, everybody's better than me.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into like, what are you seeing? So you're talking to these prospects, these minor leaguers, and then let's just face it. Let's be openly honest right now. The Tigers are now considered one of the top minor league teams in baseball, in Major League Baseball, right? We're respected. We have prospects up and down the board, whatever you're looking at, whether it's Baseball America or ESPN. The Tiger prospects are showing up and better than ever, right? When you're interviewing these prospects, what do you see in some of the common threads, and what's making them successful? How are they reaching these levels right now?
A lot of when we talked to Ryan Garco, who is the director of player development for the Tigers, there's a plan in place, and there was a drastically different. It's not that, and I've said this before, it's nothing against Al Avila or David Littlefield or the previous regime, where we talked to players. When we talked to players before, it was, well, what's the plan? What would they tell you to do? And they would say, oh, they just said, do my thing, and then just kind of go and hope for the best kind of thing. Now, it's a far different thing where we'll talk, for example, when we talked to Sarah Gibson Long last year, they said, hey, why don't you start throwing a changeup like you did in college? And we noticed he took a start off, I think it was in mid-May, he took a start off and came back, and his K per 9 jumped because as a result, the Tigers were looking at something that would allow him, like between him, Brett Hudler, and we're talking to all these pitchers last year. The one common thing is that they looked at a pitch to add to their repertoire to make them better, to make them a better pitcher. And same thing with the hitting too. There was a lot of tools being used when we're at the West Michigan opening media day last year. The biggest takeaway, it was something so simple you don't think about it, was Isaac Pacheco and Jace Young. The question was, so what's changed in the offseason? Like the food. They instantly like smiled and got really excited because it's not peanut butter and jelly or whatever leftover pizza was there. And those things are making a big difference. And people want to complain about the Tigers not spending, and I understand. I mean, that it's understandable that the payroll, they can look at those things. Fundamentally speaking, it is night and day the way they have player development. When we asked Ryan Garco about, so what did Kyler Montero do to get better? Oh, we gave him instructions in Spanish. Excuse me, like something you would think that it would be something as simple as some of these players who were coming over from Latin America that would be in place already, but that wasn't. And just something that like those little things like that you don't think of, or perhaps you might not think of, that seem like perhaps make common sense. Now they're implementing that, but just there's everybody has a plan, and that's something that I did not notice before, and they are using a lot of science and data behind it, and it's refreshing to see because considering that I've been following this team since I was a kid, the Tigers have never had a guy that they consider signing long term like that with the Cole Keith contract. They don't. I mean, as much as good as Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson have been, I mean, Cole Keith for his age did his numbers last year in between Erie and Toledo are probably no exaggeration, one of the best Tiger seasons by any Tiger minor leaguer in history. I mean, you're talking. I mean, John, you can relate to this. You could probably count on one hand the amount of Tiger prospects that you've seen that are been positional players that have stuck around and been outside of the 1984 core group. Brandon Inge. That's it. I mean, Brandon Inge, Omar Infante, Ramon Santiago, Chris Granderson. That's it. I mean, you really, I mean, you got to think about this for a moment. Like scrapping even Debbie Cruz, but he was a Rule 5 guy. So the system has not. You should get excited as a Tigers fan because fundamentally speaking, it's not your old school farm system anymore.
No, it's a good point. I mean, because they've really revamped everything, and you're seeing it. We have the benefit of seeing it in West Michigan, right, with the Whitecaps, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the podcast about what you're expecting to see at the Whitecaps this year because they're going to have some pretty exciting players. But let's talk. I know that Zach really wants to, in Ty as well, get to all right, these players that are going to make the opening day roster or be right there. I mean, what are you expecting? What is Rogelio Castillo expecting out of a Colt Keith in his first year, assuming he makes the club, assuming he's going to play second base this year? And then what are we expecting from Riley Green, who's coming off that injury, and Spencer Torkelson, who had kind of a quiet, great year, on a national, when you look at things nationally, right? Tiger fans know what kind of year he had. But what are you expecting out of this team this year in 2024?
I expect the Tigers. I mean, for me, let's start with Riley Green. I just want him to be healthy. I mean, I look at a player like him who I compare him to like somebody like Brian Buxton. I mean, Brian Buxton, when he's healthy, he is the difference maker. He's so quick down the first base line. I love Brian Buxton. Watching him play and knowing that the Twins have been handicapped because he can't play the outfield anymore because his knee's so bad. I don't want Riley Green to have the same fate because if you look how MLB is even in the little marketing they do with Detroit, Riley Green's the guy. And so a healthy Riley Green makes a big difference. And I think it gives the team a certified two hitter, a guy in the two spot that can hit the ball and really cause a difference out there. And so I expect him, if he could get 120, 130 games without falling apart. I mean, I think the Tigers have a good chance to compete for the Central. And I know that sounds strong, but if you're coming back from, if you look at defensively, what they lost, let's think about this for a second. You lose Miguel Cabrera. Some of the players they lost, by subtraction, the defense got better. And they had some significant upgrades with that. So I think Spencer Torkelson, sometimes you see him, there's at times at first base, he looks like he has stone hands and you're not sure what's going on. But at least you have Mark Canna behind him to back him up a little bit. So you have that insurance there. So that way Torkelson's not playing 130 games there, 140, 150 games there. As far as Cole Keith goes, I think he has a good chance of making opening day roster. I mean, you look at some of his at-bats at spring, he takes it like he's been taking the opposite way. It's not like just a flair thing. It's with purpose. Like he knows that. I think his approach at the plate has been sound. I think he's had a really good camp, and if he ends up, we were talking about this on our Discord private chat, and just kind of like going, well, no, what we should expect. I mean, if he hits 250 and 20 home runs, I'm excited. But I think it's going to be a little more than 250 because I think, again, it sounds like I know I'm trying to be really extreme about Cole Keith, but it's just I've never seen a guy. I tweeted this out. The longest stretch of games he had last year without a hit was 3. He had 2 stretches where he didn't have a hit, or 3 game stretches where he didn't have a hit. That was it in Double A, and then once in Double A, and I think twice in Toledo. That was it. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, it's just the amount of times he hit in a game, in multi-hit games. It just, I know the way he makes adjustments at the plate, but I expect the Tigers overall to be over 500. If the pitching can be there, I think the Tigers could win the Central in a year that the White Sox are awful, the Royals are. And Cleveland and Minnesota, I think, are going to get. Cleveland's better than Cleveland's rotation's sick. I mean, Gavin Williams is a hammer, but I really think it's going to boil down to the Tigers pitching staff, and that's where I have questions on.
Yeah, Zach, I'm sure you have plenty of things you want to ask about prospects.
Yeah, I definitely like Colt Keith a lot. I definitely want to move the conversation into the pitching side, though, because I'm really interested in prospects and pitching prospects for the Tigers. Looking at their rotation, like it's pretty obvious, like Maeda, Skubal, and Flaherty, they have top 3 spots. But for 4 or 5, I don't know if they're going to do a 6-man rotation at all this season, but you've got Mize, Manning, and Olsen are kind of like maybe Faedo or the next guys coming in there. But Jackson Jobe is so good. I mean, the top 100 for LB just came out. He's ranked 25 overall, all of baseball per prospect. He will likely be in the major leagues at some point for the Tigers in 2024. But I'm really interested in you. And you mentioned Gibson Long. I like him, but I want to ask you about Ty Madden. I do have Ty Madden in my deep dynasty league, so maybe 2024 for Madden. Obviously, Gibson Long has already been up. Is it going to be, I guess, big picture, my question for you is, how do you see the Tigers rotation panning out in 2024? Will there be plenty of opportunities for guys like Madden and Gibson Long to get starts, even though they're not the top prospect like Jackson Jobe? How do you think it'll play out this season?
I think that they're going to play up to their rotation because their depth, because there's questions about whether or not the Tigers were going to use guys trade their pitching depth to get a bat, because it's clear they still need a bat. And this is where I kind of maybe perhaps pause that if everything goes right to win the AL Central. You look at a guy like Sawyer Gibson Long, he hasn't thrown yet because he's got a hamstring injury right now. You can't take. It's not that you don't discredit his September numbers, but as you guys all know, sometimes the September numbers are kind of deceiving because it's against guys that are the season's over and perhaps the at bats are different than they are per se. But you look at his stuff and go, okay, that stuff will play. And I think that you'll see him pitch. I think he might start the season in Toledo, get some if his stamina back up because he's injured right now. But a guy like Reese Olson, to me, Reese Olson is a good 4th or 5th starter, and I think he can fit well in the rotation. He has been pitching better as of late. His movement, his spin. Even I think somebody like Montero will see as well as a starter. I mean, Jairo Montero had the best. I think he led the organization strikeouts last year. He quietly moved up 3 levels last year. He did his slider, fastball. He's got another breaking pitch I'm just drawing a blank on right now. But if he can continue to build, I think you'll see Montero pitch, and he's a guy who I think can be a big difference maker. And Wilmer Flores, who I think might be pitching out of the bullpen, he changed his mechanics. I talked to him a little bit down there in Lakeland about he's lost weight, and he's abandoned kind of throwing that changeup he was working on last year, because last year was 92, 93. Now in spring, he's like 98, 99 and popping, and just the fastball's got life again like it did in 2022, which made him a top 100 prospect. And so I'm not really as far as Ty Madden goes. The guy's a big dog. I mean, watching him pitch in the Erie Championship last year and the Eastern League Championship, step up, and he told us after the game, like, games like this he lives for, and he really carried himself last year because one of the things he had to work on was pitching better against lefties. Always struggle against lefties because that fastball rose up a little bit too much and he was getting hammered. He's been working on it, and I think that Madden is a guy who I'd love to see. He probably might start the year. Toledo's so stacked, he might start the year in Erie again, and that's not a problem. Double A is, the slight differences between Double A and Triple A are just subtle, but I think Madden's a guy. There's still a little bit of a bullpen risk, but I still personally think I see him as a starter and who could make a difference at some point. If Casey Mize can stay healthy, that's great. I mean, if you give Casey Mize 125 innings, this team is set. But I expect appearances from Montero too, and Job. Yeah, I don't know what happened. The dissension of Job last year and watching him go against Richmond and Erie, watching that start against them was just like masterclass. It was like a different pitcher altogether, and his stuff is electric.
So I think you and I are going to have a good season heading over to see the West Michigan Whitecaps. You and I have our passes to get out there and see some games this year. Hopefully we'll run into Rogelio when he's out in West Michigan. But Ty, you and I are probably excited about a couple of players that the Tigers are hoping to bring into West Michigan.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the Whitecap season. I was texting a buddy of mine today. He was like, I can't wait to visit, man, so we can go watch Max Clark. What do you think of Max Clark, Rogelio? Do you think, where do you think he's going to end in 2024? Do you think he'll be in Erie, Toledo? Do you think he'll get a cup of coffee in Detroit? What are your thoughts on Max Clark?
I think you can see him as far up as Erie. If all his swing mechanic changes that he was making in the offseason, looks like he's been generating a lot more leverage through his swing, more power, getting his head, the head of the bat out faster. I'm not gonna lie. When he was drafted tonight, because I wanted Langford, I really wanted Langford. I did a draft live show, and the thing about being live, as you guys all know, your first impressions, you can't have a chance to make a first impression again. And I literally visibly was like, really? But yeah, I was like, damn it. And then, then I composed myself. I'm like, you know what? The more I found out about Max Clark, the more I found out he was a gamer. And that was true all offseason. And there's one thread that among these Tiger guys that I've noticed about the minor leaguers is that they always are seeking, it's a good team building thing. It's like he cleans out the dugout, and like there was somebody giving him grief about that. It's like that's who he is. He's a baseball player. He's a baseball gym rat guy, and that's who he is. And I think if he starts the season, it wouldn't surprise me if he started the season at Lakeland, but quickly make up his descension to West Michigan. Maybe just because West Michigan might be so stacked this year at the start of the season. But because you look at the Whitecaps and what do you get back from Roberto Campos? I mean, Campos missed the last half of the year last year, and there's some questions about, he's been hitting the ball harder. Can he get that ball lifted up in the air more and drive the ball? What do you do with the curious case of Christian Santana, who's been down in Lakeland for seemingly forever? Do you give Christian Santana a chance at West Michigan? Or do you give him another year at Lakeland? And so that's where I see a lot of things with West Michigan I like. I see Isaac Pacheco. I think people are already kind of write him off a little bit, which is weird because he's not even 21 yet. It's going to take time. And he's got a really good arm at third. I think he's going to be future third baseman. You got somebody like Luke Gold coming back there. Luke Gold, good solid bat. Jose Dila, that's another guy that you can cut on in the rotation too. This is a guy that I've been been really high on since I saw him pitch in Lakeland. And that's Jaden Ham. I believe out of West Tennessee. Jaden Ham is a guy who I think is going to be a really good pitcher. I love his delivery. I like the way he attacks the zone. That's a fun guy that's going to be fun watch at West Michigan this year. But as far as Max Clark goes, I can see him landing. I can see him landing in Erie. I just don't. Unfortunately, with the Langford being going out of his nuts, comparison to Langford's not fair because, as you guys know, prospect development's not linear. It's and he's older than Clark, but that weird cloud is going to hang over him, and I really don't understand that.
Zach, didn't we have on someone that works for his agent on one of the podcasts for Big League Dreaming?
Yeah, we did. We had Blaze Salter on, who played at Michigan State, former West Michigan Whitecap himself, a big first base power hitter. He now works for Wasserman Sports, who they're with. Max Clark is one of their clients, so he knows Max, and he's very excited for him. I have a fun question for you about Max Clark, Rogelio. If you could put money down, if you had a prop bet on like what month and what year you think Max Clark will debut for the Tigers, what month would you pick? Because like right now, the top 30s just came out. MLB has Max Clark ETA 2026. RotoWire has Max Clark 2025. Where are you going with?
I'm gonna go based off maybe the way Scott Harris has been unpredictable. Well, maybe not trade, like he hasn't been really he hasn't made a lot of trades yet. But that being said, I'm gonna say 2025, and I'm gonna go ETA July 2025. I think he forces the issue. I think he has a full year in the minors, tears it up, and if he can, if he's up to what his potential could be, then I think he gives the Tigers no choice, because I mean right now you have Parker Meadows, who could win the Rookie of the Year. You have Riley Green right there right now, and the rest of the outfield is kind of like, if you think about it, Marcano is not a long-term solution. So the Tigers can hold on until next year, and if he does what he's supposed to do, then yeah, I can see him there July 2025.
There you go, Tigers fans, clip it. July 2025.
Well, Rogelio, really thank you for your time. You've been a great guest. I would love your insight. This has been great for me as a Tigers fan, but as you can tell about the rest of us with Zach and Ty on the podcast, we love our West Michigan Whitecaps. We love our Tigers, even though Zach is a big Mariners fan and Ty is a big Mets fan. We still will always root for the Tigers in some capacity. So it's been a lot of fun. Ty, any other questions you have for Rogelio before he takes off here?
Yeah, one last quick one. Sure. What advice would you give to someone wanting to start a podcast? Like I'm sure you've heard it before. Like, oh, you do a podcast? That's cool. I want to start one. What's like some advice you'd give to somebody?
Be consistent. Be yourself. And it sounds, I know that sounds really somewhat simple and really simple and kind of somewhat cliche. It's true. Like every Thursday for the last, between Wednesday and Thursday for the last 10 years, I've been doing a podcast, and people know that. And that's what they like about it. When we hear and you never know who's listening too. I mean, the reason why we approach it professionally is, for example, we have a listener who became really friends with, who lives out in San Francisco. He listened to the Tigers. He was trying to find something that wasn't the run-of-the-mill from radio. He wanted to find something different, and so he found upon us, and he'd been listening for years. We had no idea. He just came up to us one day at a game. Chris and I were just sitting there, and it's like, I like your show because you guys don't swear, you guys do things, and you approach the game in a way that I like, because you guys are consistent. And it stuck out to me, because he's like, I know every Friday I'll get a new show, and if I don't, you'll let me know ahead of time. And when we started doing stuff on YouTube, it was the same kind of premise too. Like, people know if we don't miss a show, they know that something's going on. And so I think people get so caught up on numbers because they want to go viral right away. And it takes time. It really does. And, some people get lucky and they can end up working at a big thing out of it, and they made themselves out of it. There's a lot of people that we know that have done that. And that's great. I'm not, and I love that. But you have to kind of, like, then there might be days where you look at a live audience and there's maybe 2 or 3 people listening. Don't get discouraged. Just have faith in yourself, have faith in the process, be consistent, and don't be afraid to take. There's a lot of times where I'll ask our audience, hey, what do you need me to do? What do you guys need me to do? Roger, sometimes you talk too fast, or you slow down sometimes, or, have more confidence in yourself, or whatever the case is. Be authentic, but also don't be afraid just to go out there and try it out. And don't give up after 3 weeks because you're not getting 60,000 downloads. It took us a while to get here, and I'm forever grateful for people that come out there and listen to us and come up to us and just offer us, like, oh, I'll buy you guys lunch. And it's weird. It's weird to me because I'm just a dude talking baseball. I'm never gonna be one of those guys like, you know who I am. I'm not gonna pull Ben Verlander kind of thing. Sorry, I mean, anybody who likes Ben Verlander, but I just want to be authentic with people, and so when people come up to me, and we've had this at Lansing Lugnut games too, where I've had even I had a fellow play for the Lansing Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or something to that effect, say, "Hey, I found you guys' podcast," and he pointed out about my name. He's like, just found him relatable, and so that was really cool. And yeah, just be yourself, and don't be afraid to just go out there.
Awesome.
Love
Great,
it. Love it, man.
Yeah, great advice. Zach, anything you want to add other than your applause for Rogelio? I love it.
Oh, thanks for coming on, man. This was awesome. I appreciate Dad, you connecting us and meeting you, Rogelio.
Likewise. I mean, I want to know one day why you guys became Mets and Mariners fans. I mean, Mariners fans make sense. My brother is a Ken Griffey Jr. You know, he has junior jerseys, baseball cards. He's got a whole room dedicated to the Mariners, so I get it. But I go
Yeah, they wore teal jerseys, and like it was this thing in the '90s. Everything was teal. No, but like Dad mentioned, Tiger Stadium. He'd take us to games, and he told me that Griffey was the best home run hitter. I was like, well, he's my favorite player. And then he would take us to Mariner games, and he signed my ball after one game, and case was closed from there, pretty much.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me it was Piazza growing up. Piazza was my favorite player, and I kind of started getting into it when they were making their run in the Subway Series, and then a couple years later, the Tigers weren't doing very well, lost a ton of games in 03, so I was just like, I'm the Mets guy.
It's awesome. One of my favorite players of all time to play for the Mets, Roger McDowell, who was on MTV, like all those MTV sports stuff. I don't know why I remember that, but those Mets team, like some of those Mets teams from the '80s too. Dwight Gooden pitching 216 innings in the minors. It's insane. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again for joining the show. We appreciate it. We hope to run into you at a West Michigan Whitecaps game this summer, and we'll have to do this again, Aurelio.
Thank you again, guys. This was fun. Thank you. Seriously, it's awesome.
Awesome. Ty, can you let people know how to get in touch with us in the podcast one more time?
Yep, you can follow us on Twitter, X at BLD Pod. That's at BLD POD. Gotta show the merch. You can also check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And of course, we're here on YouTube, Big League Dreaming the podcast, and TikTok at Big League Dreaming. We'll see you in the next one, Saturday at 9 a.m.
All right, Rogelio, and really quick, you want to wrap up where where we can find you?
You can find me on X at Rogcast Baseball and over on YouTube at Tiger Mileage Report and Motor Speed Metrics.
All right, take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Saturday on Big League Dreaming the podcast.